Welcome back, campers.
That was Genevieve.
And that was Kaitlyn.
And you have arrived at Camping is Cancelled. The year is 1979. The place is a quiet neighborhood in the sturdy historical town of Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. It is a warm Friday night in June, and 36-year-old Ken Reinert is on his way to play in a father-son softball match with his 10-year-old son Michael's Cub Scout group. Ken had been at the field just a few minutes when he saw his ex-wife Susan's car pull in. Michael was in the seat next to her, grinning in his blue-striped Philly shirt, blue jeans, and bright white sneakers. Ken and Susan, who went by Sue, had been divorced for around 3 years, and they were still on really good terms. Sue was very involved in both Michael and their daughter Karen's sports and hobbies, which was why it struck Ken as odd that instead of parking and walking Michael over, Sue barely brought the car to a full stop for Michael to hop out before she sped off, without so much as a wave to Ken. They had already planned for Ken to drive Michael home afterwards, so he shrugged off Sue's odd behavior. Maybe she was just running late for something or other. After 2 innings, the softball game was brought to an end thanks to a sudden downpour, so everyone relocated to inside a nearby church gymnasium for their Cub Scout meeting. Ken was chatting with his second wife, Lynn, while Michael ran around with his friends, when suddenly the figure of Sue appeared in a nearby doorway. Sue earnestly waved Michael over and appeared to say a few words to him before turning to leave with Michael happily following. Again, Ken found this a little odd, but the children lived full time with Sue, and she was an amazing mother. So Ken figured if she'd need to change their plan and pick up Michael early, she must have had a good reason. It was around 8:45 p.m. when Ken and Lynn pulled back into their own driveway, and no sooner had they walked in the door than the phone rang. It was Michael. He said, "Hey Dad, I just wanted to call and apologize for leaving the game without telling you. I had to go home and scrub my floor because I am going away." Ken told Michael that's okay, bud, then asked where was he going away to. There was a long pause on the line. Then Michael said, "Just a minute, Dad." In the background, Ken could clearly hear Michael ask his mom, "Dad wants to know where we are going." To which Sue replied, "Why don't you tell him we are going to Parents Without Partners?" So Michael did. Ken knew that Susan was very involved in the group Parents Without Partners. She'd found support there after the divorce and had even become one of its local leaders. Ken figured she must be taking the kids with her to one of their weekend conferences out of town. They'd love the excitement of a road trip. So Ken told his son he loved him and good night. Just 3 days later, Ken Reinert would be struggling to keep his knees from buckling as he was escorted into the clinical cold of a mortuary exam room and asked if he could positively identify the woman laying on the table. Early that morning, her unclothed body had been found in a motel parking lot, brutalized and crammed into a wheel well of her own car. Ken felt the blood drain from his face. Under the harsh fluorescent lights, there was no doubt in his mind who this woman was. And as for her 2 children, it was as if they'd vanished from the face of the earth. Dear campers, this is easily one of the most jaw-dropping and bizarre cases we've ever covered, and a case that, unbelievably, 46 years later, has never had a period placed at its end. At the time the case was so well known, it inspired a popular book and a made-for-TV movie, but after the 80s, the conversation around it dwindled to next to nothing. But not today. This is part 1 of our telling of the Mainline murders. Lights out, campers.
Oh man, the mountains called my number 1. I'm just a life-size lottery ticket in the hand of the one.
Once upon a night in 1964, at a sorority party at Pennsylvania's Grove City College, Susan Gallagher met Ken Reinert's eyes from across the room. They were both seniors. Susan was an English major, and Ken had just been accepted into the Air Force ROTC. Ken was immediately struck by Sue's eyes. They were large and dark in her delicate face, and when she smiled, they became absolutely mesmerizing. Sue was smart as a whip and top of her class, but also very down to earth. Ken was kind, stoic, and strong, and the two senior classmen felt an attraction to one another immediately. Ken would later say that he was so drawn to Sue because she was someone he wanted to equally protect, but also looked up to. Neither Ken or Susan had ever been in a relationship before, and once they realized there was a spark beneath their friendship, they dove in head first. On the night of graduation, Ken asked Sue to marry him. The couple then had to spend an entire year apart while Ken completed military training and Sue pursued a master's in English. But in July of 1965, they got married, surrounded by family and friends on the lawn of Susan's childhood home in Ridgeway, Pennsylvania. Over the next 9 years, Sue and Ken traveled and lived all over the U.S., wherever Ken was stationed with the Air Force. He worked as a radar technician and flew B-52 bombers in combat missions during the Vietnam War. To keep herself busy while Ken was deployed, Sue made friends in the Officers' Wives Club and worked part-time as a high school English sub, all while she pursued her master's. On September 23, 1967, baby Karen was born, and the family was stationed in Puerto Rico. Sue split her time between home and being a college English professor, and whenever Ken was home, he worked on pursuing a master's of his own in business administration. To Ken, it seemed like Sue was happy in their marriage. They were young and optimistic, and they both enjoyed the adventure of military life. Just 3 months after Karen was born, Sue was pregnant again, and baby Michael arrived 9 months later. This time, Sue decided to step back from teaching and be at home full-time with Karen and Michael for several years. And make no mistake, this was not because Sue felt it was an obligation or like her duty. She just sincerely loved being a mom, and she wanted to spend as much time as possible with her children before they reached school age. I feel like Sue is almost before her time because she is prioritizing her career. She has goals and dreams, but also is the perfect definition of this was a time when it started to be a little bit more like, women, you can have it all. But really, I think that that's bogus. We can't have it all. You cannot have a full-time career and be a full-time parent without a lot of support, and you have to pick and choose what seasons of life you're going to give most of your tank to. And I think it's really cool, and that she thought, what do I most want to devote my time to in this stage of life? Well, my kids are super little. I want to be at home with them.
And she's able to do that.
And she was able.
That's awesome.
She was able to, and she had support from her husband, and I think that that's awesome. But then went, as we'll see, right back to work once they were in school age, because that's what she wanted to do. So, you know, it seems like they were a really great team and supported one another a lot in that way. And that's really hard to do, to being not just a military couple, but when there's so much shit going on in the world and your husband is flying actual like fighter
bombers.
That's terrifying.
You literally had a fresh newborn and were pregnant all over again.
Oh my god, she had some gumption for sure.
That means those kids were like born the same month.
Oh yeah, just 1 year apart.
So you had a 1-year-old and a newborn.
Oh man, almost like having twins, except one is slightly more
Honestly, I'd take the
advanced
newborn
than the
over the 1-year-old.
At least the newborn, you set it somewhere and it won't crawl away.
For the most part.
Yes. So by the year 1971, Ken had reached the rank of captain and honorably retired from the Air Force with multiple awards. Ken and Sue decided they would settle in their home state of Pennsylvania so they could be near both of their parents. Sue was ready to start teaching English again, and she'd had multiple job offers, But ultimately, she decided to accept a position with Upper Merion High School. The school was situated right on the end of what's considered the main line of Upper Merion, definitely on the upper side of upper middle class, and the school's facilities were state of the art. So that's where that phrase mainline murders comes from, the main line of Upper Merion. But Sue said what really solidified her decision was that at the time, Upper Merion High was producing the highest numbers of merit scholars in the country, which meant it had a really rigorous academic curriculum taught by the best of the best teachers, which is exactly what Sue wanted to be herself. So, in no time, Sue had established herself in the heartbeat of Upper Merion High. She came across as quiet and reserved, but she apparently had this special knack for getting her students to share her own excitement about whatever they were learning, and for taking care to get to know each of her students individually. It also became this joke between Sue and the students and staff that if she got really enthusiastic during a class lecture, she had this very soft and quiet voice, but if she really got going, I feel like this happens to me sometimes, her voice would loudly crack like she was going through puberty. But whenever it would happen, she would really just laugh at herself and laugh with her students about it, and so that only made her more likable to everyone around her. And Upper Merion High was really the kind of place that Sue could see herself flourishing in a decades-long career. And I feel like that's pretty rare for when you are just in your first full-time teaching position.
Yeah.
Especially when you're that young, you kind of get a feel for, is this the kind of place I want to be forever?
There's so many avenues you can take as a teacher.
Maybe you're a few years at one high school, a few years at another, but right from the get-go, she was like, oh, I'm locked in. I'm happy here maybe for the rest of my career. So in the years that Sue did spend there, in addition to teaching English, she served as co-advisor for the school's yearbook, and she created her own filmmaking class inspired by her own love of movies. In later years, she became a part of a project whose goal it was to improve and make more accessible the public high school English curriculum for the entire state of Pennsylvania. So, girl was busy.
A boss.
I guess that's what you can get done when you don't have doom scrolling taking up your time.
If that isn't the truth.
Honestly, though. But upon Sue's initial arrival at this amazing top-of-the-line school that she loved, there were two people introduced into her life who would end up altering its course forever. People whose names you're going to be hearing a lot throughout this story. A fellow popular and charismatic English teacher named William S. Bradfield, who went by Bill, and Upper Merion High's principal, a man named Dr. J. Smith. Whenever Sue wasn't at school, she threw herself into being a mom for Karen and Michael, who were by now elementary age. Ken was confident that his family had achieved the classic American dream, and he was like, I can't ask for anything more. I'm happy. And then, dun dun dun, Sue asked him to join her for marriage counseling. Ken, as you can probably guess by everything we've told you about him, was the epitome of that generation that was known as the silent generation, who he was raised by, and being a veteran, and this idea of going to marriage counseling horrified him. He felt that he was happy enough, very content in their lives, their marriage, and even if they did have some problems like most couples do, he, as he said, was not about to pay money to go discuss them with a total stranger. Absolutely not. So, Sue said, okay, I'll just go alone. And she did. Several months later, she asked Ken to separate. And again, to Ken, this didn't make any sense because Sue didn't give him a specific reason for wanting to separate other than her general unhappiness. Now, it did seem to wake up something in him that his marriage was in real trouble because she's like, okay, now I want to separate. So he agreed to move out and start going with her to counseling. And surely, Ken thought, in his own words, quote, Sue just needed a little time to come to her senses. So after 2 months of being separated, Ken told Sue he was going to move back in because A, he didn't want to be separated, so they weren't going to be separated. And B, it was still his house, so he had a right to be there. And while legally true, this did not have the effect Ken was hoping. So when he did move back in, it wouldn't be for long. Okay, let us just very briefly touch on this, Kaitlyn, because in some of my readings and as we are building a picture of who Susan was and who Ken was, it's not really super relevant to the story what their problems were that led to their separation. But because we are talking about Sue as eventually the victim of murder, and because some people may or may not have agreed with her decision of wanting out and wanting a separation, I do want to take this as an opportunity to say that, again, I think what she was doing, asking him to go to counseling and then asking for a separation again in this time, is incredibly gutsy. It's incredibly brave because they very clearly had issues that she repeatedly asked to be addressed. He said, no, we're just gonna put a smile on and, again, very classic that generation. And most women in that time would have put their heads down and would have got back to it. And Sue said, I'm not going to do that. And many women wouldn't have had the option to leave because they wouldn't have had the career or the means to support themselves. So we don't know what was going on behind closed doors. That's really irrelevant to the story, other than I was not able to find anything that indicated that that there was abuse. Just that they had come to a place where they very clearly had grown apart.
Well, even in the beginning, it stated that they had a friendly relationship.
Yeah, and that they were the first people they'd ever dated. They were co-parenting. They met in college. Everything happened so fast. They had this very whirlwind life where they were never really together that much if he was deployed a bunch. Right. And then there's a shift to now into a very different rhythm of life. And that can really highlight or bring to the surface issues in a relationship.
Well, so we don't know about Bill or Jay.
Yeah, exactly. So, yeah. Once Ken did move back in, also, I don't think that's the way to go about saying refusing to separate. I don't know. He was doing the best he could with what the good Lord and his parents gave him. But as we are now going to talk about, there was a reason, at least now, maybe none at the beginning, but now why Sue wanted out of her marriage and there was no turning back. And this was a reason that Ken stumbled across in a stack of letters in the house. These letters...
So like her DMs.
Yeah, her DMs, but a stack of letters. And they were all written by Sue to the same man. A man who she was clearly deeply in love with. The head of Upper Marion High's English department, Bill Bradfield.
My bet was on Bill.
Yes. Now, in a really great book about the Mainline murders written by author Loretta Schwartz-Nobel, titled Engaged to Murder: The Inside Story of the Mainline Murders. And Loretta writes about Sue that when Sue wrote to Bill, it was like, and this is a direct quote, that he had seemed to release a hidden erotic aspect, a passionate core that had been buried deep within Sue. Quote. So if you are very interested and you want to, I highly recommend this book. Is really excellent. She actually has a big portion of these letters in that book, and it feels weirdly like disrespectful to Sue to read them.
Yeah, that's my
here.
initial thought.
Yeah, so I'm not going to, but that pretty well sums it up. And they are incredibly sexually graphic, but in a
they're both
very
English majors.
yes, but in a very sweet, intimate way, not in a way that's like gross or icky, but reading them, I felt like I was really like intruding on someone's like the deepest core of themselves. And as it, just imagine being in Ken's shoe, like if you came across it and you read it, you would be like, oh, like, okay, this is like over.
Oof.
Because it wasn't just like weird crush flingy or even like
hookup messages, so like
exactly.
Meet me like here, like it wasn't just a fling.
Yeah, it was very like you said, a passionate core that had been buried deep within her. And if what Sue had written in these letters was true, Bill was just as deeply in love with Sue as she was with him. And Sue writes in these letters like expressing back feelings that she says that Bill has expressed to her, and the way that he's demonstrated his love to her emotionally, physically, verbally. And again, it's incredibly tender, it's incredibly like erotic, but also in a way that it seems that he is like getting her emotionally and meeting these needs that she has, and that she's likewise doing it for him. And so Ken didn't really know much about Bill other than clearly from these letters that he was deeply in love with Sue just as much as she was with him. And like she'd occasionally mentioned him in like chats about their jobs, but whoever he was, he's clearly a significant person in her life. And with that, dear campers, Ken realized Sue did not just need time to come to her senses. So their separation was permanent. And by now it was 1974, and Sue moved out and bought a different 2.5-story house in Ardmore, Pennsylvania for her and the kids. And both Ken and Susan, you know, it was like a sad parting of ways. The book talks in more detail about this, how Ken even then was like, if Sue had wanted to, I would have still stayed with her, just because he was so comfortable and complacent in his life that it was just like, I mean, if she decides that she wants to be with me, like I'd still be with her. But Susan was like, this is over. I'm moving on. So she moved out, bought the house, and they mutually agreed that it would be best for the kids for them to live most of the time with Susan and spend every other weekend and some holidays with Ken, which is exactly what Susan wanted. So that is where they are in 1974. Things have changed quite a bit. Kaitlyn's eyes are bugging out of her head. Good Lord.
I'm just going to keep all unnecessary commentary. I mean... Ugh.
Is there something that you were thinking, wanting to say?
No. Just divorce and
Yeah.
like, oh, it's just sad.
It's sad. It's a mess, clearly. Ken,
Baby.
it's
Oh,
not cool.
do you hear
It's
yourself?
not cool. Yeah.
Do you hear? And like, I don't want to say like, that's, why do you think she like found intimacy from somebody else? Because that's not right.
Yeah.
That's not right. But
it's like two things can be true again at the same time. It wasn't right the way that he found out.
Oh, absolutely not.
But also there's only so many times where somebody can make bids for connection and cry out
Well, it's like
for help. And she asked to go to counseling, and then she asked for the separation.
Yeah.
So
Oh, yeah.
what
Like, she's asking to
Yeah.
try and work on things, and
Yeah.
baby boy, all you're wanting to do is stay comfortable. Life is not comfortable.
No. No.
Relationships are not comfortable.
Nope. So,
Oof.
I mean, it's sad, but that is where we are in 1974.
Okay. So, over the next 5 years, Sue threw all of her energy into building a life for herself and her kids. When she wasn't teaching, she was being supermom, chauffeuring Michael and Karen to sports and helping them with homework. She got involved in Parents Without Partners, like we mentioned before, a support group that connected single parents in her area. And she made friends. One was her next door neighbor, a woman named Donna Formalt, who also had young children. Donna knew that Sue was seeing a man named Bill Bradfield, and maybe more than anyone else in Sue's life, it was Donna who saw firsthand how in love Sue was with him. Very shortly after Sue and the kids moved in next door, Donna and Sue decided to go shopping at the mall together. They'd been having a great time when they walked past a small arts and crafts store, and Sue, out of nowhere, absolutely broke down crying. The two women sat down on a bench, and through her tears, a story came tumbling out of Sue. She told Donna that she was deeply in love with one of her coworkers in Upper Marion High, a man named Bill Bradfield. Sue wasn't proud of how things had happened, and she tried to fight her attraction to Bill initially, but he'd also fallen for her. And that's kind of hard to fight off.
Yeah. Especially when they're working at the same
Yeah.
place and seeing each other.
It's like two magnets, like on the right
Yeah.
sides being connected. Like, you just can't.
What a
Ugh.
mess.
She was still married to Ken, and Bill was living with his girlfriend, a woman named Susan Myers. Sue decided she was willing to blow up her life for Bill, and Bill led her to believe he felt the same. What she thought they'd had was so serious, they both decided to end their relationships, move out, and marry each other. And Sue had done this, divorced Ken, bought a different house, and she was ready to marry Bill. Bill told Sue that he'd done the same with Susan Myers, ended their relationship, and moved out of the house that they had shared together. He'd assured her that he had. Oh, this motherfucker.
Yeah.
But just a few days later, in an ugly confrontation in the teacher's lounge of all places,
Yeah.
Sue learned that Bill was very much still living with Susan Myers.
An ugly confrontation was actually one that apparently was between Susan Myers and Susan Reinert.
Ooh.
And that it was like a physical altercation.
Ooh.
That was in another article that had been written by someone who covered this story a while back. So I'm not sure that it was a very well-sourced article. So I'm sure it's legitimate, but I was like, oh, damn.
I also just want to say, I find it very slimy when people date somebody with the same name as their partner.
Yeah.
It's a cop-out.
That it's like a pattern almost.
It's like, oh, well, I can remember the name easily, so I won't mess
Yeah.
anything up.
And as we'll go on to learn about Bill, he definitely is slimy. The
He's an English
slimiest.
teacher. They're all kind of whores. It's kind of like, I mean, our English teachers love them, and like, not trying to stereotype, but they were
Oh
always
my
pregnant.
God. Yeah, oh my God.
They were
Now
always
that I
pregnant.
think about it. Yeah.
If you had to like bracketeer teachers,
Huh. Those slutty
English
little
teachers were the like,
It's because they're romantics.
yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
That's true.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe he and Sue just weren't meant to be together like he'd originally thought. Sue was understandably absolutely destroyed, and it was nearly impossible to move on from their relationship when she had to see him at work every day. Try as she might to move on, she was still hopelessly smitten with Bill and hopeful that he would realize that she was the woman he was meant to be with. Donna didn't really know anything about Bill Bradfield other than what Sue had told her, but she hated to see her friend, who was normally so calm and quiet, be in so much pain. And Donna wasn't the only friend of Sue's to witness her break down over Bill Bradfield. Before the mall incident in the fall of 1975, Sue's coworker and very good friend Pat Schur had just pushed through the large double doors of Upper Marion High when she saw a frantic and crying Susan Reinert literally running down the hall to the teacher's lounge. Pat was instantly alarmed and hurried down the hall after Sue, where she found her collapsed on the floor of the teacher's lounge and sobbing harder than Pat had ever seen anyone cry in her life. Wow.
Oh.
She was so hysterical that Pat knelt on the floor and rocked Sue back and forth like a baby until she calmed down enough to speak. Sue told Pat that for over a year, she had been quietly seeing the head of their English department, Bill. Sue said she'd known he was with another woman named Susan Myers, but Bill had told Sue that he was working on breaking things off with her. But instead, she just found out Bill was planning to move in with her. In a desperate attempt to change his mind, Sue had written him a letter, part of which was extremely passionate and explicit. And Susan Myers had found it.
Oh, God.
Man, fuck Bill. Like,
Yeah.
how disgusting.
This
Ugh.
is also beyond messy because I recently learned, I don't know how I missed this at first, but Susan Myers was also a teacher there, another English teacher there. There was apparently like 13 or 14 English teachers. This was a huge high school, and Bill was the head of the English department.
So Sue and Susan were co-workers even if they didn't like cross
technically,
paths?
yes.
Whoa.
So they would see each other in the lounge and stuff, and this letter was one that Susan Reinert had written left on Bill's desk, and Susan Myers found it. And then later on, when she's interviewed by police, she tells police that she kicked Susan Reinert at the school and like shoved her in the teacher's lounge. And I was like, God damn, that's some drama.
Holy, that's
Yeah.
messy.
And that's why Susan Reinert was so upset and devastated, because Susan Myers had just confronted her and been like,
Actually,
back off, you bitch.
oh gosh.
Yeah.
May
but
that type of love never find me.
literally. And here they each are thinking that Bill is fully invested in both of them. But then, as we'll go on to see, Bill had a completely different idea about the nature of his relationship with both of them. Anyways, don't want to get ahead of myself. So, as you can understand, both Pat and Donna were highly alarmed at this level of anguish that Bill seemed to have elicited in Sue, because again, she was always so together and level-headed. And like Donna, Pat realized that for as charming and well-liked that Bill was among the students and staff, she didn't really know a lot about him, like most people didn't really. And that didn't mean he was a nefarious person. There's plenty of people who just prefer to keep their private lives private. But then, about a year after this teacher's lounge incident in 1978, Bill didn't have his car at work one day, so Pat offered to give him a ride home. So now, at this point, rumors had been swirling through the school for around the last year that Bill, like we just said, was very much playing the field with both Susans. And Pat, being Sue's friend, a no beating around the bush kind of bitch, so once she had Bill in her car, she was like, Bill, why can't you just pick one Sue? And for a moment, her question seemed to hang in the air. And then, Kaitlyn, Bill reached out a hand and gently laid it on Pat's own hand. He smiled at her sadly and said, quote, "My life is fragmented, Pat, and I don't really love either Sue." Pat didn't even know how to respond to this, so they spent the next few minutes in silence until Pat had pulled the car to a stop in Bill's driveway. But instead of saying thank you and goodbye like a normal person, to Pat's horror, Bill Bradfield leaned in towards her and whispered in what surely only he thought was an irresistible voice, "Pat, I'd like to know you much better. I'd like to know you inside and out." Where's the ick button? Ick button, ick button.
Eject button. Get the
Eject
fuck out of my car.
button. Eject. Then he closed his eyes and continued to lean towards Pat and opened his mouth like he intended to kiss her. Pat lurched away from Bill and ordered him to get the fuck out of her car. She raced home, straight to her telephone, heart pounding, called Sue and told her everything that had just happened. Can you imagine? This man is gross. After this, Bill and Sue's on-again, off-again situationship was very much off. And by Sue, I mean Susan Reinert. Unless we specifically refer to Susan Myers, anytime we say Sue, you can just assume we're talking about Susan Reinert. A year went by, and it seemed like this time Sue really made an effort to disentangle herself from Bill. She threw herself into a leadership role at Parents Without Partners and went on a few dates with other men. She took on extra projects at school, and she was Michael and Karen's biggest cheerleader at their sporting events. Ken Reinert accepted that there was no chance he and Sue would be getting back together, so he remarried and became a senior personnel officer for Fidelity Bank. In 1979, Michael Reinert was living his best 10-year-old life. He was a social butterfly in his 4th grade class. He was great at sports and not so crazy about homework, but he still got really good grades. The adults in Michael's life described him as friendly and feisty, with striking eyes like his mom, Sue. His greatest passion in life was baseball. His 11-year-old big sister, Karen, was even more a mini version of her mom. Karen was definitely more introverted, but she was very good friends with her next-door neighbor and loved pretending to be an English teacher just like Sue. She was in 6th grade and had just hit that awkward puberty stage that we all found traumatic, but she didn't let it hold her back from excelling at gymnastics. Her plan for when she grew up, she told everyone, was to be a teacher just like her mom. And by all accounts, Sue and Ken co-parented their children very well. Sue remained close with Ken's parents, and she regularly had them over for meals and holidays. Mr. and Mrs. Reinert would later say that despite Sue and Ken's divorce, they never stopped defending one another. Like, they always stuck up for each other to their in-laws, which was, really very mature and very good of them. It shows what kind of people they are.
Yeah.
And the Reinerts themselves never stopped loving Sue and considered her just as important to them as if she was their own daughter. So all in all, life for the Reinerts, Sue, ex-Reinert, Reinert family, extended family, Ken, seemed to be in a peaceful, contented rhythm. But this is a murder podcast.
Thanks for the reminder.
You're welcome.
So now it was March 1979, and Donna, remember, the lady who was Sue's friend and neighbor, started noticing a familiar car again in Sue's driveway. I've been this friend before, and it is infuriating, but you still want to be supportive because, guys, if you didn't get it, it was Bill's car. Bill's car. It's like, babe, you can do so much better.
Yeah.
Donna asked Sue if she was dating Bill again, and Sue had told her, yeah, but that Bill didn't like her discussing their relationship with other people.
Red flag guy. Red flag guy.
Surprise, surprise. This really didn't sit right with Donna, as it shouldn't, guys. Like Jen said, red flag. So she made a mental note to pay extra close attention to the goings-on at her friend's house. The first thing she noticed was that Bill's car had first appeared again right around the time that Sue's mother passed away. and she had left Sue a significant inheritance of land and money. At the same time, over at Upper Marion High, rumors started circulating that Bill and Sue were back on. And this time, it was more serious than ever. It's so silly how the teacher's drama is even with the high schooler drama. Like, it's very, like,
it really
parallel.
is. It really is. You just jump forward 20 years.
Gosh.
Oh, God. It's depressing, really.
It really is.
High school never ends.
Pat, the friend that is the one that Bill tried to hit on, she said no. So Pat, being the, like we just said, the no beating around the bush bitch that we love, asked Sue if the rumors were true. And they were. Sue told Pat that Bill had finally asked her to marry him and that she had given him her mother's diamond ring that she'd inherited when her mother had died, so that he could have the rest. I hate this. So that he could have it reset as a wedding band.
This is what was unclear to me when I read it in the book. Did she give it to him so that he could have it reset as his own wedding band? Because that's what I'm getting from that. Or did it mean he said, give it to me and I'll have it reset for you as a wedding band? Because that also seems like something he would do. Okay.
Like taking the ring, getting like the diamonds or like anything that's on it and then setting it into a new ring.
Okay. That she gave it to him because he was going to do it for her.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, you know, she probably never saw that fucking ring again.
Gosh. Yeah, here's your fake diamonds. So, their plan was to get married that July in England. Sue also told Pat that in addition to the ring she had given Bill Bradfield, $25,000 of the money she had just inherited from her mother. Pat asked why in the world, like, bitch, why the fuck would you give Bill so much money? But Sue had reassured her that it was Bill who was really helping her out.
Oh, God.
When Sue had inherited all of that money, Bill had asked her what she'd most like to do with it. For Sue, there was no question. She wanted it to go towards her children's education. And that sounds like the type of mother, like the type of person Sue was.
Yeah.
Like that makes sense.
Yeah. And just in case anyone's wondering if you heard typing, it's because I was looking it up. Apparently, $25K in 1979 was worth around like $115,000. So that's a pretty
That's
good chunk of change. Plus all the land that she inherited, which
Yeah.
was probably about the same. So she could easily be looking to be worth that inheritance around $250,000.
That's crazy.
And I saw that number thrown around in several different things I read was that was basically what she acquired sum total, and her inheritance from her mom was the equivalent of $250,000.
Okay.
So a good chunk of money.
And she wanted to put it towards her children.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Bill loved her idea so much that he said he would also contribute $25,000 of his own money, and they could place the sums into a high-yielding investment account that would guarantee Karen and Michael's entire education journey would be taken care of.
Oh, he's such a good guy.
My eye keeps twitching. Bill apparently knew all about how to go about this, so he told Sue if she gave him the money, he'd take care of it all for her. Sure, Jan. Something about this didn't sit right with Pat, but Sue seemed so confident in her and Bill's plan and was so happy with their engagement that Pat knew there wouldn't have been anything she could say to change Sue's mind.
Did you ever go through this with a friend?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm sure friends have gone through it with me.
Yeah.
Like, same. Because, like, when you're in that mindset,
There's no talking you out of it.
like, you're in your own bubble. You can't see the outsides of your bubble like the other people can.
Yeah.
It's so, when you're so wrapped up in that.
Oh, it just makes me think of something that happened when I was in college with a very good friend and our group of friends, to the point where we actually tried to have like a very loving, and I feel confident saying it was very loving and genuine because we were good friends, like a kind of a confrontation, because this person basically said that they were dropping out of school to get engaged and marry this person very quickly. And he was much older, and just the vibes were very not good. And I just remember us all like sitting around being like, please. And
like actually looking out for her best interest.
Yeah, but like you said, when you're in that, and that was her relationship, and I think I would have been the same way, being like, who are you to pass judgment on my life and what I'm doing? You're not in my relationship. You don't know this person.
Yeah.
But I say all that to say that there's a reason why it is important to have really good friends who you trust, who can lovingly be like, hey, I'm seeing this. And
not even lovingly, like who are willing to put in that tough love.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
tell it to you straight. Like you need people to kind of slap the rose-colored lenses off your face.
You're so right. Like Pat tried to do. And if Pat telling Sue, your fiance literally tried to shove his tongue down my throat, and
like as he was juggling you and Susan, and then told me that, hey, the feelings aren't really true.
Yeah.
And then he tries to hit on like
her, and that she's still defending him and excited to marry him, then
and did that the same time that Pat finds Sue sobbing uncontrollably over this man-child. I slapped my mic. I'm upset.
Yeah. There's no changing her mind at that point. But it just shows you how twisted this hold is that he has on her. Somebody who is clearly very intelligent and smart and logical thinking and has like built this life for herself.
That's scary.
That's so scary. Oh God.
So, as the weeks went by, next-door neighbor Donna noticed Bill's car parked in Sue's driveway constantly. But whenever she tried to bring up Bill and how things were going with them to Sue, Sue would immediately get very secretive and shut down. Sue also drastically pulled away from her and Donna's once very close friendship, and Donna understandably felt hurt and confused by all of this. But Donna had still hoped things were working out for Sue and Bill this time around. Then one day at the start of May 1979, Sue popped over to Donna's house with a handful of legal papers and asked Donna if she and her husband would sign as witnesses for some changes as she was making to her will. The Formalts told her, of course, they would, but they found it a little odd because they had already signed as witnesses to Sue's will just a few months before, actually right after her mother had died.
God.
On the first will, Sue had listed her brother Pat as the trustee of her estate, but on this one, the sole trustee was none other than Bill Bradfield. Sue told them they were welcome to read it over, but they didn't see any reason to since the will didn't personally affect them in any way, and they thought, I mean, while it might be a little weird, who were we to judge a legal document? Like, we'll just sign it.
Yeah, they're probably like, well, she knows what she's doing. Like,
yeah.
Whatever. Yeah.
I mean, Donna's probably like, I've tried talking to her.
Also, have you ever been given something to sign and you sit there pretending to read it, but you're just like skimming it and nothing is registering?
If you want my kidney at this point, just get this paper out of my face.
Click, 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 click. Accept all, accept all. Turn.
I acknowledge.
Give me my app. Give me my whatever.
Oh gosh, yeah, we've definitely been subdued out of all that.
Yeah,
but
God.
I mean, yeah, they signed it, and that was that.
So a few more weeks went by, and some more things happened that were odd, but also not so odd that someone couldn't just be like, well, it's really not any of my business, so I'm not going to get involved. Like, one day, Neighbor Donna and a few other neighbors on the street were spending a warm day tending to their yards when the front door of Sue's house burst open and Bill Bradfield came hurrying down the steps, clearly in a rush to leave. Sue appeared on the porch just behind him, visibly crying and pleading with him to come back inside the house. Then, when Sue realized a bunch of neighbors were out in their yards, she just ducked back inside and shut the door. And Bill jumped into his car and sped away. So,
Ooh,
I mean,
my nosy ass.
I know.
I would have been vacuuming the grass.
I know.
Huh?
Ooh. But you can see where it's like, oh, they're like arguing about something, but nobody's throwing hands, you know. It's like
there's no like physical abuse being shown.
Yeah, and we're in a time where people tended to put their heads down and mind their own business
and kind of gossip behind closed doors.
Yeah. So, again, just weird. But with everything else happening, it's just red flag after red flag.
Yeah, there's history.
Exactly. And then, just a couple of weeks after this, Karen Reinert and Donna's daughter Luann decided to walk together to Michael's baseball game at a nearby park. They came back with cups of Italian ice and were going to go play at Luann's house, but Karen said she was going to run inside her house first and put the rest of her Italian ice in the freezer for later. Now, Donna knew that Sue and Bill were both there because Bill's car was in the driveway. Not anything unusual. He's been there a lot at this point. But what was highly unusual was that from her kitchen window, I love Donna so much, Donna could clearly see Karen jiggle the front doorknob, then ring the doorbell, but there was no response. Karen then ran around to the back door, but it was also locked. And Sue never locked the house if one of her kids was out playing. And she took care to know where they were. And Dawn was like, that's weird. Like, and this also seems like a place where people just didn't really lock their doors, you know? And it's summertime, the kids are going in and out. You just aren't going to lock your doors in the middle of the day knowing both of your kids are out and about. This didn't seem to bother Karen. She's a resourceful kid, so she opened a small window near the back door and disappeared inside with her Italian ice in her hand. But just a few seconds later, Donna could hear Karen screaming in genuine terror from inside the house. And she screamed several times before she came running out through the front door alone. There was no one following her, and she ran back over to Luann in the yard. Now, for whatever reason, whether Karen just went back home later and it was forgotten, or I wasn't really able to find why, Donna was never able to find out what it was that had scared Karen so much. So again, this is just like another weird thing where you could be like, oh, what if she just got scared because she was in the house by herself? And like, what if Sue and Bill had gone for a walk? Or what if she walked in on them like having sex and ran out? Is that why you're laughing?
Yeah.
Why you're laughing?
I'm so immature.
But even then, though, like the locking of the door like that and knowing that your kids could come in at any time, it just seems...
Yeah.
I don't know.
I could see in a sense, like in one way, yeah, what if they were doing some adult one-on-one time and they're like, okay, the kids are gone, let's just lock the doors real quick just in case they happen to come back. But she knocks, she rings the doorbell, she knocks, like goes to the back door. Then she goes through a window. That's enough time to gather yourself. Yeah. You know, and so it doesn't make sense.
It's just weird.
And you would think she would at least tell Luann what scared her. You would think. Maybe, and then you would think if it was something so important, Luann would trust in her mother to say something. Yeah. So it could be a number of things because, I mean, that age, 6th grade.
You could see a spider on the floor and run out screaming. So. Again, it's like it's weird, but it's not weird enough that someone's going to be like, I need to call the cops.
Yeah. Oh, that sucks. I hate not knowing.
Yep. hindsight and all these little things, you would just obsessively think about them.
But finally, this story finds us back at where we began, on the Friday of June 22nd, 1979. Aside from what we've already told you, there's a few more details we need to talk about. The first is that at some point in the day, it's unclear exactly when, but most likely it was before Sue picked up Michael early from his Cub Scout meeting. Sue placed a call to her in-laws and asked if they would be able to have Karen and Michael stay over that weekend. And normally the Reinerts would have said yes, but it just so happened that it was the weekend of their wedding anniversary. So instead of saying, yes, of course, bring them right over, like she would have said any other day, Mrs. Reinert asked if it would be okay if they waited to see the kids until Monday. Now, prior to that phone call, Sue and the Reinerts had made plans for Sue to drop Michael off with them Monday before driving Karen to her gymnastics camp. When that was over, Sue and Karen were going to come back to the Reinerts to have dinner and make plans for Michael's baptism later that week.
Which is important to note that because it means that Sue never intended to take off and not come back, that they were already making plans for the next week.
Yeah.
And in very specific detail.
Right. Like go here, like come back. I will come back for Michael. Like then we'll do this.
Yep.
So the second thing is that, again, at some point in the day, Donna and Sue had a chat about the joint garage sale that they were planning to have the following Saturday. So yet another thing. Sue told Donna she was heading with the kids to a Parents Without Partners meeting in Allentown, where she was supposed to be leading a workshop, and that she'd signed up the kids for several activities there also. She said she was a little worried because apparently there was a gas rationing happening at the time and her car was already low on gas. But she and the kids had to be back by Sunday evening for all of the events they had that coming week. And like we mentioned at the top of the episode, Sue dropped Michael off in a hurry at his father-son softball game. And then she picked him up early without saying anything to his dad, even though he was supposed to be dropping Michael off at home later. And then Michael called his dad to apologize for leaving the meeting early. So, if you guys remember, he'd said he'd had to come home and get ready to go away that weekend. And when his dad asked where, he heard Sue tell Michael, tell him we're going to Parents Without Partners. And that was it. So no details. Just
tell him we're going to Parents Without Partners.
And we knew that Sue was already going to this, and it seems like kids weren't supposed to go, but now they are going.
Yeah, and what's also weird, though, is that Michael and Karen already had been signed up to do activities at Parents Without Partners, which says to me that they knew that they were going, like that they already had plans, that they were aware they were going away that weekend.
Yeah.
So it's weird that the dad would call and say, hey, where are you going? And then for Michael to be like, Mom, where are we going? If the plans hadn't been changed at that point, if that makes sense. Like, it would be like in that time frame, like prior to her picking him up early, it was like something abruptly changed in the plan.
Yeah, it's as if like she had planned to bring them, and then she goes and asks her in-laws, her ex-in-laws, like, hey, can you actually watch them this weekend?
Yeah.
And when then that fell through, she's like, okay, I'll just take them. It's as if like, I don't know, all speculating. Someone told her not to bring them.
Yeah. Yeah. It's
all speculating, but that's what I get so far from what I know.
Yeah.
So, yeah. And then, just before 10 p.m., in the middle of a downpour and hail, Sue's neighbor, Mary Grove, saw her and her 2 children run across their front porch, duck into Sue's little red Plymouth, and drive off into the night. Several weeks back, Sue had made a reservation for her and the kids for that Friday night at the George Washington Motor Lodge near where the workshop was being held in Allentown. So again, they were supposed to go. But what she hadn't told Donna earlier that day was that several days ago, she'd actually canceled that reservation. And then that Wednesday, she'd placed a call to a woman in charge of the Parents Without Partners conference and asked if there was anyone who could fill in for her that weekend, because she had a appointment scheduled for that Friday evening that might make her late to the conference.
Okay. So that would mean that her plans changed at least maybe at the beginning of that week before Friday. So maybe Monday, Tuesday. I think that her plan changed. She tried to cancel the reservation, made the call, and then maybe she at first planned to take the kids still with her, but then was like, oh, maybe I don't want to take them after all. So she would have called Mr. and Mrs. Reinert and asked if they could stay.
Yeah.
And then they would have said, oh, actually, can we wait? So she would have been like, F, now I have to take them, which is why she left and got Michael early from the Cub Scouts.
I'm so confused, though, because it doesn't make sense to me. One, it doesn't make sense to me that why not ask their father to watch them? Like,
yeah, I don't know.
And then if you had an appointment late on Friday that would make you late for the conference, why did you then pick Michael up earlier than need be? And then you still left around 10 p.m.
Yeah.
Like, the timeline's very convoluted to me.
It is weird. It's almost like there's plans that she's making that are changing rapidly over the course of a few days. Like, maybe she makes one plan and then that changes. And then she makes another plan and it changes. You know, like she's communicating with someone being like, no, actually, you need to do this. No,
Well,
actually,
that sounds
let's do
like somebody
this.
I know. And that type of communication pisses me off.
But doesn't it? Because it seems very, and that she's just being like, oh, okay, yeah, okay, okay, we're doing this now. I don't know. And
It's
you know the
very
person
weird.
who I'm thinking of who is telling her these plans, the person who she's on the hook for and she'll do anything he says. That's what,
Yeah.
I don't know. But it's very weird and convoluted.
It just doesn't make sense.
No, not
Like,
at
if we
all.
were to actually Google Calendar this out, like, the way that things are changing so rapidly, it also doesn't make sense for the time period because there's no, like, quick texting.
Yeah.
Like, back and forth, like, oh, actually, this has changed, this has changed. It's like...
I mean, it could just be, like, quick phone calls back
Yeah.
and forth.
Pagers.
Yeah.
But yeah, that appointment being scheduled for Friday evening is throwing me for a loop now. And it's appointment in air quotes. It's like,
What? What is that?
Did you ever, was there anything that you found that claimed what that appointment might have been?
No.
Wow. So, as far as anyone knows, that view Mary Grove had of Sue and the kids running to the car in the rain was the last time anyone but the killer saw the family alive. The following Sunday night, at around 7 p.m., a man named James Mooney had just picked up a buddy from the airport and was giving him a ride to his hotel, a new and upscale spot called the Host Inn near the Pennsylvania Turnpike. As the men pulled into the parking lot, they passed a small red Plymouth Horizon parked off to the side. Its hatchback was partially open, and they could see what they thought was either a white laundry bag or a white leather suitcase sticking out of the trunk. They wondered if one of them should go over and shut it so whoever left the hatch open wouldn't get anything stolen. Good men. But then, they didn't want anyone to think that they were trying to fuck with someone's car. Smart men. So they decided to mind their own business and leave it. And I get that train of thought.
Not my circus. Or my train of thought, it's a trafficking scam.
Literally. But I was putting up
hit on the back of the head and then thrown in that trunk. Yeah. No.
So, a few hours later, a patrol officer named Joseph Rudy came rolling through the Host Inn parking lot and also noticed the open hatchback on the same red Plymouth. So he ran a routine check on the plate. It was registered to a woman named Susan Reinert. So at that moment, Officer Rudy didn't have anything else to do. So he went inside to see if she was staying at the hotel to let her know that her trunk was open. The registration desk told him they didn't have anyone by that name checked in as a guest. Rudy hadn't actually walked over to check out the open truck yet, but before he could do so, he got radioed that a fatal car accident had just happened nearby, so he hurried back to his car and sped off towards the scene.
And in case we didn't clarify it before, this inn is not the place that Susan had originally made a reservation. It's a completely different one, like opposite way from
Because
where
wasn't
she
it
was
like
headed.
a wilderness lodge?
It was somewhere like that.
Yeah, George Washington Motor Lodge,
Yeah.
which makes it seem like a little...
It was like 35 miles further out from where this place was.
So, a few more hours passed, and then, at 5:25 a.m., a local 911 operator answered a call from an undisclosed location. The caller was a man whispering in what sounded like a Hispanic accent, and all they said was, "There's a sick woman in a car in the parking lot of the Host Inn." Then there was a few seconds of silence, then a click. The operator was highly annoyed, but he did relay this message to officers in the lower Swatara township, along with his own personal opinion that the sick woman was probably just another drunk. Officer Rudy was still at the scene of the crash from earlier, so the call was patched over to 2 other patrolmen from one township over who were just about to clock out after a long night shift. As you will not be surprised to hear, dear campers, what they encountered in the Host Inn parking lot was absolutely not just another drunk. In the trunk of the red Plymouth lay the body of Susan Reinert. She was completely unclothed and was curled, actually jammed, into a tight fetal position so that she could be wedged into the wheel well of the car. Out of habit, one of the officers placed 2 fingers on her neck to check for a pulse, but they both knew just by looking at her that it was no use. While being careful not to touch her any further so as not to contaminate the crime scene, here's everything the officers were able to gather. Susan had clearly been dead for some time, possibly several days. Enough blood was pooling internally in her lower back to indicate that she had been in the trunk for at least 12 hours, and whatever had been done to her before was absolutely brutal. A large amount of clearish bodily fluid, possibly mucus or sperm, was smeared around her mouth and nose. Both of her eyes were black and blue and swollen shut, and her forearms were covered in defensive cuts and bruises. Somehow, her front teeth had completely torn through her lower lip. And worst of all, both of her wrists and ankles had deep bruising from visible chain marks. And additionally, bruising on her back that made the officers think that she had been chained tightly to something hard like a tree or maybe a platform and had been ramming herself against it in an effort to break free.
God.
It was clear that this woman had put up a prolonged and courageous fight against her attacker. Back when James Mooney and his friend had been the first to notice the open hatchback of the red Plymouth and thought they saw a white laundry bag sticking out of the trunk, that wasn't a laundry bag. That was Susan Reinert's hip.
Oh my God. It's never
A
what you think it is.
mannequin,
Never a
the
mannequin.
trash
Never.
bag.
Oh my God.
That's a lot of damage to a body, not just like being choked or stabbed or like shot. That's extensive
Torture.
abuse. Yeah, torture. Yeah.
Brutalization. Not that those other things are not brutal in any means, but what we mean is that whatever happened to her seems like it was prolonged.
Yeah, it wasn't a quick death. It wasn't
like somebody was, I'm sorry to be graphic, but trying to just like quickly take her out and that be that it was something that was personal and just, God, so terrible. Ugh. So by now, the sun was coming up, and poor Officer Rudy had no sooner wrapped things up at the fatal car crash than he was hauling ass back over to the Host Inn parking lot. All it took him was one look in the trunk to call in a detective, the DA's office, the Pennsylvania State Police Criminal Division, and the coroner's office. Susan Reinert was pronounced dead on the scene. Photographs were taken, and she was loaded into an ambulance bound for Community General Osteopathic Hospital, where her ex-husband, Kenneth Reinert, was asked to identify her body. In the ensuing swarm of phone calls and panic following the discovery of Sue's body, it was quickly established that both of Sue's children were nowhere to be found. None of their usual babysitters or grandparents or extended family members or neighbors knew anything of their whereabouts, and Sue's neighbors were quick to come forward to police with all the information that we've just been through with you guys about Sue's planned weekend away to Parents Without Partners and how they saw her get in the car with her children around 9:30 that Friday night. Understandably, Kenneth and his parents were beyond frantic to find Michael and Karen. So as the search for the two children got underway, an autopsy of Sue was performed at the hospital. And this autopsy would be the first of multiple grave errors made right at the start of this investigation. The first was that Sue's initial autopsy was performed not by a seasoned forensic pathologist, but an intern. Sources conflict on the name of this person. I've seen several different names and across several different articles, but the most important thing that we need to know is that whoever this was not the person who was supposed to have the final say and the final sign-off in her cause of death. But I guess maybe they were the only person available at the time, so they
Absolutely
were
not.
like, it's my time to shine.
No. I'm
So-
all for interns, students, shadowers under, like,
Like
working
tutelage, like
yes.
being a mentee.
Yes.
Yeah.
Like, you can be there, absolutely. You can learn, you can do, but you're
Mhm.
going to do it under the guidance of somebody who has the actual knowledge and credentials and
Yep.
time. Ooh, Genevieve. I want
Let's
to punch my
talk-
computer already.
No! No, we gotta finish the story. Or part one, at least. I
Go on to
promise
number
only
two.
two.
Continue.
Okay. His findings, as follows, are directly from Loretta Schwartz-Nobel's book, Engaged to Murder, The Inside Story of the Mainline Murders. Trigger warning, guys. I'm going to quickly run through these autopsy findings. They are pretty brutal. So, at around 1:40 p.m., the day that Sue's body was discovered, lead detectives met with both the coroner and this pathology intern at the morgue. Routine swabs were taken from Susan Reinert's vaginal area, anus, and mouth. Scrapings were made from under her fingernails. 3 cubic centimeters of urine were obtained from her bladder. 10 cubic centimeters of blood were taken from her heart. Her body was x-rayed and photographs were taken. Then an incision was made in a Y shape that started just below her neck at the clavicle, and then one at a time her organs were lifted out, examined, and weighed. Her scalp was incised, her skull was sawed open, and her brain was removed. The report indicated that her brain appeared to be normal with no signs of severe bleeding or trauma. Her stomach was empty. There was hemorrhaging noted in her pancreas, left kidney, and both lungs. At the time, a note was made of a small amount of thick, creamy material on the surface of her vaginal area. This material was never identified. It was concluded that Susan, quote, could have been dead for as long as 24 hours before her body was discovered. Her cause of death was tentatively listed as, quote, respiratory depression secondary to an injected opium alkaloid combined with asphyxiation caused by a tight and forceful adhesive binding. In other words, in layman's terms, she was sedated, then strangled to death. So the strangulation was actually what caused her death. But he was wrong. And for some reason, a reason that was never adequately explained, this incorrect preliminary finding was what was listed and signed off into the official report. And it would take 6 months. 6 months for that tiny blood sample of hers to come back from testing. I don't know if that's just oversight or labs took that long back then. But it came back as showing that she had not actually died from strangulation at all, but her blood contained 10 times the lethal dose of morphine to kill someone of her size. So that was just one in the list of many errors that would greatly impede this investigation. So let us continue.
I mean, I don't do autopsies. I mean, first it took me by surprise knowing that they take urine samples. It doesn't surprise me thinking about it further, but that threw me. I guess, how can you list the cause of death when you don't have everything back?
Well, I think maybe it would be the combination of the other things that were happening, like showing the trauma to the lungs and other parts of her body, like how it would fill up with fluid.
But, like, couldn't you just list it as, like, unidentified, but, like, homicide? Just listed as homicide until undetermined homicide?
Yeah, I don't know. But here's the thing, though, is it says it was a preliminary finding.
Yeah.
So it wasn't necessarily that this person, this intern, was declaring this preliminary finding was the official outcome, but it was somehow entered into the official report.
I mean, and after giving this intern a lot of shit, it seems like they did do a good job.
Yeah.
Like, it's not like they botched everything.
No, they made an initial report, but the failure was somehow that was what was signed off on as like, okay, this is it. And maybe it wouldn't have been that big of a deal. Like, they could have done a second autopsy. You know, that's not at all uncommon.
Yeah.
But here is what happened next. So after Susan's body was autopsied, she was immediately taken and cremated, even though the hospital was under a standing order from the state police and state law that without the express permission of the coroner's office that her body was not to be released to the funeral home or anyone else to be cremated. So there was some sort of horrific miscommunication, because when lead investigators arrived back at the hospital just a few hours later that same day, the very startled hospital officials asked them, what body? Can you imagine?
When we do cases like this, and I'm so sorry, you guys can, I'm so sorry, you're going to want to punch your screen. All roads lead back to Dennis. It's like, how do all these, like, happenstance happen?
I know.
To, like, it's just the silliest little things that prevent.
In these crazy cases.
Oh my gosh. Like, what do you mean you cremated a. Okay, again, my childhood cat was cremated and then given to a farm to be scattered for fertilizer.
Oh my God.
That wasn't, we were supposed to get our ashes back. That was just miscommunication between my dad and I get that. That's a fucking animal. It's my childhood pet. I love that cat. I get it. This is a human who was horrifically murdered, who was found in a parking lot in a car. You'd think you'd kind of remember that this person is kind of.
Maybe let's
like
not.
Under cop supervision. Maybe triple check, quadruple check. I don't know.
I think it also speaks to how big this murder was in this area, because crime here was very low and the homicide rate was very low, and so they really were just kind of in over their heads. I don't know.
I mean, it did say there was a fatal car crash. Maybe that victim came to that hospital as well.
Yeah.
So that's 2 dead bodies in one morning. So maybe they got more than we know.
Yeah. Either way, awful.
Oh
and
my gosh,
we're not done.
What body?
What body? The next error was that, remember the 911 call? That
Mhm.
mysterious 911 call placed by an unknown caller with a Hispanic accent saying that there was a sick woman in the parking lot of the Host Inn. That call was accidentally deleted by the operating call center, even though, as a rule, and please do not mistake Kaitlyn and I's laughing for hilarity. We're trying not to break things.
Look, I'm reading on Sam's computer, and I'm trying to remind myself it's not mine because I want to punch it.
Oh my God. Even though, again, as standard procedure, these calls were all automatically recorded for exactly this reason. What if the caller turned out to be involved in a crime, or we need it for court or police or whatever? But for some reason, it was deleted. So that was gone. And then, not to be outdone, all of Philadelphia's papers and news outlets either ignored or claimed to have not received investigators' firm instructions not to report on Susan Reinert's death for a full 24 hours following the notice of her death. Now, here's where I'm going to give journalism a little bit of leeway here, is that we talked a lot about this in the Dennis Rader case, but there's always very much a push-pull relationship between cops and journalists. You get information, you want to put it in the public's hands. When it's involving a murder investigation, cops want to pump the brakes a lot because they don't want things being put out there.
They want to hide their cards.
Yes, exactly. So I understand police wanting them not to talk about it, but I also understand journalists being like, no, we're going to report on this because this is a huge deal, and what if there's a killer just running amok out there? But the problem is that because that preliminary report had been turned into an official report of her cause of death, that meant that the following morning, every damn paper in Philadelphia, news channels, magazines, what have you, had some version of the headline front and center that said, Upper Marion teacher choked to death, 2 children missing. And like we said before, that proved to be completely false when that was not proved to be her cause of death later. So at that point, you have the investigation thrown, people making, as we're going to get into part 2, all kinds of wild assumptions and rumors about satanic sex cults and her being into BDSM and all this stuff, what have you, running amok, all because of this one little thing on a report getting out of hand and being turned into front page headlines. So we're already in the midst of a shit show, and her body hasn't even been found for a full 48 hours, which is insane to me.
If I were wearing my watch right now, I know my stress levels would be so high, because not only am I outraged for Sue and all of this, my mama heart is genuinely like, I'm having heart palpitations thinking of 2 children and
oh my God,
like just disappearing. You have no clue, and you just found their mother completely tortured to death. Yeah,
so you're beyond panicked. And there was a statement that was issued by law enforcement on the news, and they basically, all they said about Karen and Michael was that we are hopeful that they will be found staying with a relative or friend. And that was really all that they said. But I mean, like, they had to be just losing their mind behind the scenes.
I mean, they didn't know anything more than the general public knew.
Nope. So several days later, every row was packed at Susan Reinert's memorial service at the Mainline Unitarian Church in Devon. The entire community of Upper Marion High was shocked and devastated by the brutal murder of one of their own beloved teachers. Sue's older brother Pat struggled to make it through his speech about how much he loved his baby sister because his voice kept breaking down into sobs. Sue's co-worker and bad bitch friend who we love, Pat Shore, actually rose to her feet in a moment of silence during the service and declared to the entire sanctuary, We've got to get to the bottom of this. With the help of God, this crime will be solved.
I got goosebumps.
Pat, we love you. Karen and Michael were still missing, and a terrible heaviness and anxious uncertainty hung in the air. But there was one thing every person in that church was absolutely certain of. Sue's dearest fiancé, Bill Bradfield, was not in attendance. This, plus everything we've already told you guys about all the money and the will and the having multiple Sues on the hook, trying to seduce Pat. There's a whole lot more we're going to get into in part 2, but just what we've been through alone is enough to make things look pretty damning of Bill. But campers, nothing in this case is clear-cut, and by mid-morning of the day after Susan's body was discovered, investigators had their first bizarre wrench in this case. A thorough search on Sue's car had turned up all the typical items one would expect in a busy mom's car. A small pink raincoat with change in the pocket, a woman's guide to emergency car repairs, Cub Scout pamphlet, a Great Adventure ticket. I think that's like a theme park or like a carnival, I don't know.
Like Great Adventure, like
Yeah.
Six Flags or something.
Something, yeah. And 3 stuffed animals. But then, under the front seat, this is about to take a turn, was a large, hollow rubber dildo of, and this is a direct quote from the book, it said, of the clip-on variety. I don't know what.
Does that mean like strap-on?
Maybe that's what they had in 1979.
I can't tell you what a clip-on dildo is.
Y'all, I can't say I'm an expert, but yeah, a large hollow rubber dildo of the clip-on variety, and directly under Susan's body in the wheel well was a man's blue military-issued comb that had 79th USARCOM stamped on it. And this comb belonged to none other than Susan Reinert and Bill Bradfield's own boss, Upper Marion High's Principal J. Smith.
Planted.
And that
planted was my own little input, but that's where Jen's ending this episode, so that's my theory so far. Planted.
Well, I guess you're gonna have to come back for part 2 to find out.
Genevieve.
I know, y'all, that everything seems very cut and dry, and let's just wait till the end of part 2, because this is crazy, but it continues to get crazier.
And this is a case I really want people to, like, be interested in.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't want to, like, do any spoilers, but when we get to the end of part 2, this is something we want help with.
Oh, yeah. And I don't think it's a spoiler to say Karen and Michael have never been found.
Mm-mm.
They have never been found. And it is not without lack of a colossal effort that was made, which we will be getting more into in part 2. But this is very much still a chilly case.
Gosh.
So let us know what you guys think. We hope you enjoyed it. I always feel so icky
in the only way that
that
you can.
Yeah,
Just,
we hope it grabbed your interest and that you'll be coming back for part 2.
if anything, just know that any man or woman who feels the need to make you believe that you're, like, the most important to them while stringing along somebody else,
Uh-huh.
no. Nope. If you were important, they wouldn't need anybody else, and vice versa. Like,
Unless everybody's fine with it and everybody's fully, like,
Sure.
on board with a unconventional situation or whatever. Like, this was not what was happening here, though. It was very much a playing the field situation. And as we're going to get into part 2, the 2 Susans were not the only 2, if you can believe it. I don't know where this man found the time, but yeah.
I'll save commentary for later.
We'll save commentary.
But as you guys know,
As you know from this last episode, and if you've been with us the last however many hundred and
Good
something
God.
episodes we have done,
The world is a scary place. So, dear campers, always have courage and remember to stay kind.
of a bitch.
Bye.
Bye.